Today on the West Sports Show, we get the inside word on the emotional toll at the Eagles after their latest heavy defeat, while at Freo, we look at Josh Treacy's blazing start to the year and the important piece of history at the MCG the club will make this week. And we are brought to you by TabTouch. Got the touch? Download the TabTouch app today. And remember, you win some, you lose some more. For free and confidential support, visit gamblinghelponline.org.au. Well, it is a very special Monday edition of the West Sports Show today. My name's Chris Robinson, filling in for Glenn Quartermain, who's over at Gather Round, and another man who's over in South Australia is Craig O'Donoghue. We welcome him in now. Craig, where do we find you in South Australia on this Monday morning?
Robbo, you find me at Adelaide Airport, preparing to fly to Melbourne because the Dockers are over there for the week. And when I say preparing, I'm still about 5.5 hours from being able to get on a plane. It's fair to say that there wasn't a lot of availability, so quarters might have driven back from South Australia to Perth by the time I actually get on a plane, but we're here and we're operating, so that's the most important thing.
Well, let's start with Fremantle, Craig, because they're the most recent WA team in action yesterday. You were there in the Barossa as they romped to, I think it's fair to say, romped to a 61-point win over Richmond. 3 straight wins now into the top 8. This was a really nice day for Fremantle. Plenty to like, no injuries. A few guys coming back from injuries themselves and getting through unscathed. Josh Treacy was imposing. Shea Bolton was great against his former side. What stood out to you as the biggest positives from this win?
What you mentioned there, the fact that Sean Darcy got through, Hayden Young got through as well. Josh Treacy kicked 6. And they just dominated the second half, really, after they were 11 points down during the second quarter and then just romped away. And their ability to get back into the contest after getting flogged in the clearances early and in the contested ball early was really important. Mm-hmm. Justin Longmuir gave them a spray at halftime and said, get your act together. And they got their act together and took over. And a 61-point win got them back into the 8. So their percentage rose up to 108, which was 16 percentage points higher than what it was last weekend. So getting that win by a significant margin after getting flogged by Geelong in round 1 was just so important, because after round 1, their percentage was 46.9. Mm-hmm. So now they're into the 8 on the back of their percentage, getting that boost, which is so important for their season.
We mentioned the guys coming back. So Sean Darcy ticking a big box there with Freo backing in the body and his fitness and getting straight back into it. Sam Switkowski was back as well, but Hayden Young was the one who appeared to stand out. We know how classy he can be, 3rd in last year's Doig medal count. And even though he doesn't quite have the midfield minutes, the tank to go completely in the midfield yet, we saw him resting forward for stints yesterday. He was just a class above, and he really underlined that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. When you look at the goal that he kicked from 55 out,
mm-hmm.
It was Shea Bolton over to Caleb Sarong to Young, and he kicks it from 55 on the run. That's classic Hayden Young. And that's what they've missed, a player who can do that from that sort of a distance, and you can hit so many targets as well throughout the day. And his ability then to play as a forward, because as you said, he isn't fit enough. He's had 2 broken legs, and he's had multiple hamstring injuries as well. So he's been restricted in the amount of training he's been able to do. So then he rests forward and he takes a mark and he kicks a goal there as well. So 18 disposals, 2 goals, 6 score involvements from 85 minutes. I spoke to him in the rooms after the game. We'll have a story on him throughout the week, talking about what his plans are around that. But the fact he's kicked those 2 goals after kicking 3 last week in the waffle, that's a really good indication that when he goes forward, he's going to be impactful. And that's what you want from a midfielder who goes forward. Mm-hmm. They're not just going to be resting. They're going to be having a crack and trying to score goals. So that was real positive for them, I thought. And in terms of Darcy, I thought his ability to run was what stood out to me throughout the game. Like, he was moving at pace the entire time. He used to be the standard ruckman, plodding around a fair bit, just get contest to contest as much as you can. Sure. But he was getting there at speed. And we talked a couple of weeks back about how he's lost so much weight. I reckon he's lost 15 kilos, it looks like, around that sort of a margin. So he wasn't able to use his body as much to buffer Toby Nankervis out of the way, but he was able to run more. So we're going to see a different side to Sean Darcy now, where he's running increases, and as he gets used to what his body can actually do from a physical perspective, he'll then impose himself in that way. So those were the 2 real injury positives for Fremantle throughout the day.
Josh Treacy, 6 goals, a career best outing from him, was just absolutely imposed himself on the contest from the get-go. 3 goals in the opening 15 minutes or thereabouts. He's got 17 goals now from his first 5 games of the season. I'm going to read you the full list of every Fremantle player who has more than 17 goals through the first 5 games of a Dockers season.
I love it when you do this stuff.
Tony Modra in 2000, Matthew Pavlich in 2010, and that's the list. So he's in very, very good company. What is making him so hard for opposition defenders to play on right now?
He's clunking the ball.
Just sticks, doesn't it?
Yeah, he's able to clunk the ball as a fly comes after me then. He's able to take those marks. He wasn't marking the ball in Geelong in round 1. He was struggling with his hands there, and it was similar against Melbourne at Peel during the pre-season. But now he's leading up at the ball, so he can take the mark that way. He then charges back towards goal if he doesn't get that option, and he can take the contested mark too. So when you've got a ruckman who can, key forward, who can take those marks in a pack, will lead up really strongly and lead back really strongly. He's so hard to stop from a defensive point of view, because what do you try to take away from him when you can do those 3 things? So 6 goals, as you said, career best, and he's just allowing the Dockers now to have a different type of player who can go in there and just do what Modra and Pavlich and the stars of the game do, which is take marks, kick goals.
So they've had a really good 3 weeks, Freo. They did what they needed to do against Richmond and West Coast, taking care of the lower ranked sides, and then in between that was a gutsy, grinded out win over the Bulldogs, which they absolutely needed to cash. So their next 4 now, so they're at Melbourne this week, and then they host Adelaide. They're on the road against St Kilda, and then they host Collingwood. There's a couple of tricky ones in there, but they can absolutely win all 4 of those games potentially and get to 7-2 and give themselves a really nice platform to start the season. You're on the road with them across the coming days as they head to Melbourne. They play Melbourne at the G on Saturday. What does the next few days look like for Freo, and how do they prepare for this clash at the home of footy?
So they have today off. They flew into Melbourne last night, straight after the game. So I went from Barossa, drove out of the airport, caught the plane into Melbourne. So they've got today as a rest day. Tomorrow will be a bit of a recovery day for them. Just run the legs out as if they were in Perth. That would be their standard recovery day on a Tuesday. They play soccer, muck around, just move the legs around a bit, do some handball drills, all that sort of stuff. A bit of a flush session. And then the important thing happens. They go to the MCG on Wednesday, and they do a main session for the MCG.
So they actually train properly at the MCG.
Yeah, they train properly at the
for
MCG.
People who are watching and listening, how rare is that for a WA side to get that opportunity?
They would never in their history have had a main session at the MCG. Like they'll have had recovery session or a captain's run sort of thing at the MCG, really light, move around, have a bit of a look at the ground, all that sort of stuff. But on a Wednesday, they're never over in Melbourne on a Wednesday, are they? So to be able to train there fully and set up the ground whatever they want. Their families aren't allowed in. I'm not allowed in. Opposition people aren't allowed in. They're going to be able to do whatever they want and get a really good look at the ground and figure out what they want to do. And it's such a massive advantage for them. And the reason that they can do this at this time of year is because of gather round. So there's no games that were played at the MCG last week. It hasn't had any level of stress on it whatsoever. And then on Friday, the game in Melbourne is at Marvel Stadium when North Melbourne and Carlton play. So then that's effectively been 2 weeks off the MCG to recover from the workload that it has, which means they've been able to get out there. So Brisbane had a recovery session there, a captain's run there the other week, which is what most clubs get if they do get onto the MCG. It's just a light captain's run. This is a full-on session, which will allow them to go end-to-end at speed, do whatever they want, have their stoppages wherever they want, utilise the entire ground. It's a massive moment for them, and then they'll get kicked off for later on in the week, and they'll go to Port Melbourne or somewhere like that, or a school like they normally do. There's some pretty good venues for them with the school holidays on in Melbourne at the moment, so they can train whether they want on Friday for their captain's run. But this MCG session is really crucial for them. Fantastic
opportunity for some of those young guys to get acclimatised. They've been pretty good at the G, Freo. They're 4-3 there since 2022, which includes 3-goal finals loss to Collingwood in 22 and also a 1-point loss to Essendon last year.
Which they should have won last year.
Absolutely should have closed out, yes.
One thing that's really important from a fixturing perspective, you mentioned that what their winnable games. So whilst on paper, when you just look at it straight away, you go, yep, can win that. It's not an easy fixture due to their breaks. So they've got a 6-day break this week against Melbourne. Melbourne have got 7 days. They then got a second 6-day break the following week before coming up against Adelaide. Then it's a 7-day break into St Kilda at Marvel, and then another 6-day break before they take on Collingwood. So they've got 3 6-day breaks in the next months. So that's where the real challenges come in, especially for guys like Sean Darcy and Hayden Young, and then even Shea Bolton, who was cramping during the game at the Barossa, and even Sam Switkowski. So these are little things where when players are coming back from injury, what you don't want is to have the 6-day break. And they've got a lot of them now. So this is a tricky little area of the season where they need to look after each other.
One last one on Freo before we move to West Coast. Nat Fyfe, we saw him in the waffle on Saturday. A very unfortunate injury setback, a hamstring setback. Looks like he's going to be sidelined for some weeks to come. What does it mean for someone like Nat Fyfe? We've obviously, over the past few weeks, we've been posing questions to Justin Longmuir about Nat Fyfe and where he fits in their best, quote-unquote, best 23. What does this mean now for Nat Fyfe? And realistically, what does he shoot towards now for the rest of the season?
I think it's as disappointing as it is for him to get injured right now. It gives him a really clear mindset on what he needs to genuinely value for the rest of the year. And that is, he's been around forever. He's won his 2 Brownlows. He's captained the club. He's played in the grand final. He's won best and fairest. He's an All-Australian. What's missing from his resume is the ability to play in a flag. And this is his last year. Let's face it. He's not going on next year when he's already 33. He had a contract at the end of the season, and this is the shot that he will get. So he needs to make sure that by August he is healthy, so that if Matt Johnson breaks down, if Jago O'Meara breaks down, if God forbid Andrew Brayshaw, Caleb Sarong, or Hayden Young breaks down, if there's a spot in the team and they say it's yours if you're fit, you have to be fit. And so you'd think he'll miss the next 3 games with a hamstring. That would mean that he would then have to probably spend the same amount of time coming back through the waffle. So I wouldn't expect him to really play before the mid-season bye in the AFL. Just write off that next few weeks for the AFL totally and say, you don't want to go to GWS anyway. You don't want to go to Gold Coast anyway when you're his age. Aim for after that bye to be healthy from games in the waffle and healthy from recovering, and then try to play in the second half of the year when you know you've got round 14 at Optus, round 15 is at Optus as well, and then you got St Kilda as well. So in fact, that round 15 game might be away. I might be wrong on that. I'll have to check. But he needs to be available for September because Darcy played in a flag last year, didn't he, for Brisbane?
Sure did.
Off the back of 3 games. Will Ashcroft played off the back of 13 games. Jeremy Howe broke his arm in 2023 and played 14 games for the year. Gary Rowan in 2022 played 12 games for the year. When you're that age, you don't have to play them all. Just go play the ones that matter. Get yourself right. Is that what you'd be looking at as well?
Yeah, absolutely. He'd be 100% desperate. Nat Fyfe hasn't played in a finals game since 2015. So that's an even 10 years by the time we get to September this year. He would absolutely have his sights set on that. But such an interesting watch over the coming months to see, 1, can he get his body right? And 2, where does he fit / does he fit into that best 22 or 23? Is he a potential sub? Where is he when that midfield is fit and firing and everyone's at full capacity?
It's best 26, I reckon, that he's looking at realistically. He's sitting back going, well, how do I make sure that I'm in this team? And if they've got their best midfield together, he's not in that. But someone's always hurt. So what does he need to do to make sure that he's available for them when that person gets hurt or when that person is out of form or something like that? As I say, it's months away before he needs to be available. And you mentioned now he hasn't played in the final since 2015. That 2022 final series, he was looking okay, and then bang, away he went. So he got hurt and couldn't play and had to watch from the sideline. So he doesn't want that to happen to him. Got to be fit and available, whether he's selected or not, got to be available for that crunch time of the year.
And before we talk Eagles, a note from Woodside. As a proud major sponsor of the Fremantle Football Club, Woodside has accepted the challenge of supporting local footy at all levels, from grassroots to greatness, so it can thrive throughout WA. That's Woodside, Australia's leading energy company. Craig, let's talk West Coast. Obviously a very different flavour to the weekend for the Eagles than it was for Freo, as has been the case for much of the past few years. A 71-point loss to Carlton, who also were previously without a win, but this was quite stark. There were some serious numbers to come out of this game. 77 contested possessions for West Coast, which is the lowest tally by any club since that stat started being counted. They had a differential of -59 in contested ball, which is the 4th worst contested differential in history. We could kind of go on here, but you get the picture. What was the starkest thing to come out for you out of this hefty loss for the Eagles?
They are further away than what I think even their players thought they were. They are in for an enormous amount of pain. The other stat that you mentioned was the inside 50s, 73 to 35,
yes.
so double the amount of inside 50s.
Yep.
Disposals, 421 to 281. They couldn't get their hands in the footy. Clearances were 40 to 18. Centre clearances 17 to 5. They dropped Tim Kelly. They've moved Harley Reid to the half-back line. They've moved Liam Duggan to the half-back line as well. At one stage, looked up and their centre square was Bailey Williams-Rucking with Tom Gross, Jack Hutchinson and Brady Hough. If you had have said to anyone 5 weeks ago that they were going to have that midfield...
This was not the plan.
That was not the plan. No, they were probably on to plan C or D by that point. And we're 5 rounds into the year. So I think what Andrew McQualter is already doing is he's saying, okay, I don't care what's happened in the past with players. I don't care what you've achieved in the past. I don't care how this team's played in the past. That team has been flogged for years. This team is getting flogged now. I need to find a team that isn't going to get destroyed. And the only way to do that is to throw kids in. And he threw all of them in at the same time into the centre square, and they got an absolute lesson. But they got a lesson against Patrick Cripps, Adam Chera, George Hewitt, and Sam Walsh. So they got a lesson from the good players. And if you're going to lose by 71 points and have those sorts of numbers, you're at least going to get a lesson out of it. And they got a lesson. So the question that he now has is, does he continue to give players lessons and say, we're just going to cop these thrashings and think that he can get his own career to survive that? Or does he start to bring more senior heads back and put them in there so they've got some extra support? And he knows he's going to lose either way. Which way is the best way forward is the real challenge for him right now.
Yeah, I guess that's the contrast in what we saw towards the end of the Adam Simpson era. So Adam Simpson, since he's departed, has sort of admitted that he struggled to be able to make the tough calls on some of the foot soldiers who had done him so well, and then also didn't quite have the same luxury of time that you'd suggest McQualter has, given that he's only 5 games into his career. So it is going to be very interesting. I do like the fact-finding mission. So they've used 17 players at centre bounces through the first 5 games of the season, which is the most of any club so far this season. I don't think we need Brady Hough in the centre square. I think he's one of the guys who you could probably lock down and say, hey, that guy's going to be in defence for the next 10 years. We know what you are. But I do like the fact-finding mission where it's let's have a look at everybody here and see what we've got. Where does West Coast go with Tim Kelly after that performance in the Waffle? 20 touches, 5 tackles, probably not as resounding simply from a numbers point of view as West Coast might have liked. They're obviously keen to look at some of the defensive aspects of his game. Do you feel like they go back to him for Friday night with that short break and trying to find a little bit more experience in the midfield, or do you think they double down on youth coming into Friday?
I think one of the problems of not having Tim Kelly out there isn't that he's not winning the ball for them out there, but he's not in the centre square talking to the other players who are there. So, as I said, when you got Brady Hough and Tom Gross and Jack Hutchinson there, who's the leader out of that midfield group? You know, Brady Hought's the most experienced, but he's not a midfielder. So he's looking around going, where do I stand? Where do we go? What's the hitting points? All that sort of stuff. So having someone in the middle who's able to at least direct what's going on is really important, regardless of anything else that's happening. So that will be a question that they'll have to ask. I thought Gross was pretty good. I thought he's shown a bit in his first couple of games, and same with Hutchinson. They know they're still 5 weeks away from Elliot Yeo playing any level of footy. And he's going to have to come back to the Waffle as well, as you would have thought, as opposed to the past where he's come straight back into the AFL and got hurt every time. So it's not like they're going to have him coming in and helping out. So Kelly's probably the experienced head that they need to throw in there, at least to give these guys some sort of chance, because if you chuck Harley back in there, suddenly he's the most experienced mid out of all those other guys as well, and he's just going to get targeted and he'll get frustrated, and they're trying to give him a little bit of relief across half back. So I think they need someone who can do that job for them. It might be Liam Duggan that goes back in there. They've got to find someone who can go in and just be the voice of reason and help out and say, look, it's okay, we'll work through this. But I don't think Andrew McQualter would have made these moves without the backing of Don Pike and the board and saying, kids, you're all in there. I think that's a positive for him, because you mentioned how Adam Simpson refused to. I don't think Adam Simpson trusted that if he put all kids in and it went really, really bad, like that 171-point loss against Sydney, that he wasn't going to be sacked straight away. So he tried kids for a while, and then all of a sudden back came the cavalry as he chased the wins to keep himself employed. McQualter's got a 3-year contract to work with, and it feels now like everyone's gone, whoa, under this new CEO, new chair, we need to go really young and just see what this list looks like.
Yeah, suggest they'd be leaning on the likes of Baker and Graham as well through the midfield mix over the coming weeks. You had a really interesting chat post-game on Saturday with Brady Hough, who sort of bared his soul. He was very emotional, very candid, very open. I mean, first of all, from West Coast, absolutely appreciate and love the access and the honesty and players being candid. Can you sort of talk us through or just recap a bit of what Brady Hough said, and also what it sort of told you about the emotional toll that lots of losses and lots of big losses is taking on some of the players who have been there for 3-4 years?
Yeah, the emotional toll was what stood out to me. So a player will always be available to talk to us post-game. I asked to speak to Brady because I thought his move into the midfield was something that was worth getting to. But we only talked for 2 minutes before he broke down in tears. And the thing that cracked him was when I just said to him, look, how are you? How are you going? Like, emotionally, how are you right now? Like, you've lost another game by a massive margin, and you're a West Coast supporter growing up. And this club was successful before you arrived, and you've arrived at that time where it's no longer successful and you're going through a rebuild, and it's 80 points and 80 points and now 70 points and all those ones last year. How are you handling it? And he paused and he just went, it's effing tough. And then the lip started to quiver, and I said, are you okay? And he just stood there for a bit and then just walked off. And so I said, sorry, mind a second. No, can't. And I thought he was coming back. I assumed he was coming back. And he just went to compose himself. And then Luke Shuey walked over about 30 seconds later, and he said, what happened? And I said, I asked him how he was. And he went, oh, God. Then he went and checked on him. And then a couple of other people came over and we talked. And I said, is there anything going on in his life we need to know about? They said, no, that was just a reaction to what happened on the day. He seems to be getting okay back there. I thought he'd come back. He never came back. He was emotional. He was upset. And I thought that tells a story for what the rest of this squad is going through. And you go through it all. 22 losses by more than 10 goals Brady Hough's had from 58 games. He's had 2 wins away out of 26 travels. He's had 8 wins in total. Jack Hutchinson's yet to win a game. He's played 9 games. Ruben Jinby's 1-19 interstate. Harry Edwards is 1 win from his last 35 games. This group hasn't learned winning and how much fun it is at AFL level. They've learned how devastating big losses are. And you get to a point in any sport where you go, we're 5 goals down now. Oh, no, this might be 10 goals. Oh, no, this might be 100 points. And their minds right now are all going, whoa, this is a disaster. It's panic stations all the time because that's all they know. I'm not surprised that's how they're feeling. And Brady Hough's emotions are an indication, I reckon, of the entire club and the entire team. It was him who, unfortunately, felt the public moment where he couldn't contain his emotions anymore. But I thought it was a real sign of what this club is going through at the moment.
Yeah, it's something we need to remind ourselves, isn't it? Because it's easy to reduce the players to numbers and Supercoach numbers and Dream Team numbers and their stats and all the rest of it. But that psychological side, I mean, we saw it just a few hours ago from after we were recording at the US Masters with Rory McIlroy, who's a player who has had his demons at that course. He's had his demons closing out tight rounds of golf. I don't know if you managed to catch any of this morning, Craig, but he certainly had some jitters, lots of jitters down the stretch, and was finally able to put the monkey off the back and win. It's hard, as you say, when you get to a situation that you've been in and losing is what you know from that situation, it's hard to be able to erase that from your mind and think, I'm blocking that out and we're just going straight to the positive, because it's there. That's just the reality of being human, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you go back through history. When Daryl Cullinan came out to bat for South Africa, he could have faced any bowler in the world and been good, but he faced Shane Warne every time he came on, and they laughed at him and got him out. Yeah, every single time. South African players who are playing cricket right now weren't born in 1992 when they re-entered the system and had to score, 1 run off 35 balls after a range lane. It began World Cup after World Cup where Herschel Gibbs dropped the World Cup. They ran themselves out. They got themselves out in ridiculous situations. History is reality, whether you're involved with it or not. If Ben Stokes comes out to bat against us in an Ashes test in England, we'll all go, oh, this could be a bit of a concern, no matter what the scoreboard says. Perth Wildcats, when the streak was always in the line, were always under pressure to not end the streak. The collie wobbles were real because they didn't want to be the next team to lose those games and stuff. So your mind plays tricks on you. It's not simple. And it's going to be like that for West Coast for a long time, because these guys now go, It's going against us. There's 5 goals in a row. Is this going to be 10 goals in a row? And suddenly they just keep landing on top of them. So it's a savage, savage way to learn to be an AFL footballer.
Give us something positive before we leave West Coast, Cod. You mentioned Tom Gross. I thought he's been a real bright spot over the past 2 games since he's debuted. And also Archer Reid continuing to show that he absolutely belongs at the AFL level.
Yeah, so I like Gross's energy, which might surprise people, the nutcase that I am.
You're a very energetic man.
Yes, I like players who play with energy, and whether you win the ball or not, whether you make a mistake or not, I think the energy is what players in this sort of a scenario right now need to show. If you've got the energy the entire time, then that will make up for that will make up for mistakes, that will make up for losing. Just keep throwing yourself in, and eventually that will turn if you get more and more people who are prepared to do that. So I think he is the exact sort of player that needs to be in that midfield at the moment, because he will just keep throwing himself at that ball and never, ever stop, because that's just what he is. Archer Reid looks like he's a player who can lead that forward line for a while. Even at this age, like he's in the first year of playing AFL, he clunks the marks, he can kick goals quite accurately. He's pretty good from an athletic point of view below his knees and all that sort of stuff. I like what I'm seeing from him, and this is what Adrian McCall is trying to do. Find a player, find another player, and just keep adding bricks to those blokes on top of it and go, yep, he will play as well. Interesting, this week we're going to have Archer Reid and Zach Reid playing Mighty Essendon Football Club with Zach Reid as a key defender up against the Eagles. And it'll be... could be brother versus brother, so neither of them have had much success. Archer hasn't won one yet, and Zach, well, he won on the weekend, but he hadn't won too many before that. One of them will walk away with the victories this weekend, so the family will be nice and happy with that, I would have thought.
Yes, absolutely. Mate, before we get into the Thirsty Camel mailbag, a quick note on Gather Round, the experience of being in South Australia across the weekend. What was your highlight across a big weekend of footy in Adelaide?
Last night was the buzz around Port Adelaide and Hawthorn. That was an amazing sort of atmosphere to finish the round itself. I thought that showed, you need a main event scenario to build.
That was definitely billed as the main event.
Yeah, and we sometimes build with Thursday night footy and Friday night footy is so important, and then the round can peter out. I think what it showed is you need to bookend as many rounds as possible with a cracker at the start and a cracker at the end. So that was great, and I love the fact the planes that the crowd were doing and all that sort of stuff, and the fact that Hawthorn got themselves back into it after getting destroyed. But the atmosphere in the streets, just in general, was incredible. Like you walk around. As I was walking back to the car, 15-minute walk back to the car on Saturday night after the Essendon Melbourne game, and you're seeing jumpers all over the place from people who have travelled from all over the country and are all in bars and dancing and singing and just out in the streets and having a great time. And you're like, it just felt like everyone had gathered round to enjoy the footy. So that was fantastic. I love the fact that Norwood is an old school footy ground. I love the fact that the Barossa was set up where it was. It was a bit like Build It and They Will Come from
Field of Dreams.
Field of Dreams. So that was a great venue as well. And the reason I think South Australia works is the standing element of Gather Round. People come together with a big group of people, and they can stand on that hill. That was the most popular place at Adelaide Oval, on the hill behind the goals under the old scoreboard. At the Barossa, there were heaps of empty seats, but there was no empty standing room. Everyone came with rugs and stuff and just stood on the hill or sat on the hill or whatever it was, and enjoyed that element of it. And the same at Norwood as well. So I think that's what makes it so special. It's a unique ground, Adelaide Oval, where you've got that hill and there were beach balls being bounced around like it was a cricket match. There was everyone singing Sweet Caroline. There was the Mexican wave going on throughout games. Like there were a lot of theatre goers, which meant that everyone was able to travel and really enjoyed the experience. So I think it's here for as long as Peter Malinauskas as the Premier stays as Premier, or until someone who doesn't like sport becomes the Premier and somehow finds a way to stuff it up.
Well, it feeds into our first question in the Thirsty Camel mailbag. And remember, we'll be giving away a $50 digital voucher thanks to Thirsty Camel. Don't forget, this week's special is Great Northern Super Crisp Stubbies, I should say, only $54.99 a carton. Can't beat that value. Get your questions into the West Sport at wanews.com.au. That's the West Sport at wanews.com.au. Please include your mobile number at the bottom of your email, as we will send you a digital voucher if you're a weekly winner. Our first question from Sean. I read that WA are trying to outbid South Australia for Gather Round next year. Despite being a WA resident, I hope they fail. I couldn't make it this year, but desperate to head over ASAP for a weekend of footy and Barossa wine. Should it be scheduled in a public holiday weekend? What say you, Craig?
I'll schedule over a school holiday time
Well,
at
they
the
got
moment.
scheduling, right? Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, so public holiday weekend would be next weekend, which would be Easter. And I think that the traditions of Easter Thursday in Brisbane, the Good Friday game in Melbourne, which ties into their version of telethon, which is really important for the Good Friday appeal, and then the Easter Monday game involving Geelong and Hawthorn. So I don't think that's the weekend that needs to be removed from. I think school holidays is great. Our kids finish school on Friday, so you could really bug it off on Thursday to head on over. They don't need to be there at the last day of school. There's not much goes on. They were watching a movie.
Hang on. There was an Easter hat parade at our school on Friday.
There was actually an Easter hat parade at my school as well, and my son asked if he could come home early because he couldn't be bothered making one. So he watched the movie, and then I got him to come home because I had to get to the airport. So that was all okay. But yeah, I do think that it's the perfect time. We got the school holidays do match up with it, and it doesn't take away from the Easter weekend. So I think that's really good. I don't think WA is genuinely in a position right now where they are pursuing gather round. It's still next year that it might even be the year after actually, where it's locked away until there's people saying if we get an opportunity we'd love to try, but it feels like it's the right location, as I mentioned, for the fact that people can get here and stand on the hill. It's and all of those venues, and it's quite cheap for people to do. The majority of people will come from Melbourne. I looked at it last night. As of last night, for North Melbourne fans to fly to Perth for that Bunbury game, it's going to cost $305 or $389. They're the two options for the day before. If you brought a family of 4 over, you're already up for $1,200-ish one way, $2,400 return. That's going to be too much for most people, plus a hire car, all that stuff. You can drive to Adelaide from Melbourne 8 hours and just have a couple of tanks of petrol. So that element of it is really easy for people. There are 9 Qantas flights from Adelaide to Melbourne today. There are 13 Virgin flights. So there's lots of people who are able to fly. There were 16 Virgin flights yesterday. So there's so many people who are coming. I think that we know what it's like, don't we? How expensive it is to travel across the other side of the country at the moment. So I don't think that it's a realistic option to try to bring all those people to Perth.
The one thing I'd like to see, I think they have got it really, really, really right. The one thing I'd like to see them tinker, which would be great, there was just that overlap in a couple of the Saturday games, the West Coast game and then also Gold Coast game against North. I'd love to see them give fans the opportunity to attend all 9 games. And while there's that overlap, you're not going to be able to do that. But I'd love to see them give fans a chance and maybe even incentivize and create a challenge and say, hey, if you attend all 9 games, if you can do that, you're getting yourself a special gather round blazer or something like that. I'd love to see them give fans the challenge and the opportunity to go, hey, can you get to all 9 fixtures?
Yeah, it's a great idea. I don't think it's realistic because of the Barossa game. The Barossa is an hour out. You can't drive there. So you have to drive to about 10 minutes from the venue and then catch a bus from the car park.
So have it at Glenelg instead.
I think they're going to want the Barossa. They built a venue there, so maybe 7 of the 9 games. You can get to all the games that are in
it doesn't have the same
city.
Ring to it though.
I know. I love you. I love you. You might have to add the extra day then.
Start the Barossa game earlier, then have an hour's break and say, hey, if you're desperate about this, get your ass back into Adelaide and get to the next game.
If you had more games potentially on the Friday, if you had a second game on the Friday, then that might be an option. If you started one of the...
they did that a couple of years ago.
A North Melbourne versus
Freo
Gold Coast game. Yeah, you could potentially attempt to do that to get people in. And then you have the Barossa game. It's the first on the Saturday and the first on the Sunday with a bit of a gap, but it would be a big gap to be able to get everybody back. And that would mean that the broadcasters couldn't have everyone in a position where they want the game to go back to back to back.
Sure.
So as long as they're an hour out, that becomes a bit more.
Make it tough.
A bit more of a challenge. But I do like your get your blazer on. You can buy. There was heaps of merchandise around. Like you could buy the jumper with
all the jumpers on it.
All the jumpers on it. You can buy a T-shirt that said I was gathering around. There were hats. There were scarves. There was all these different sorts of things that you could purchase. It was stinking hot over here, so you didn't want to have too many things on at the same time.
Sure.
But yeah, they have done it. They've done an amazing job. It's my first time at a gather round, and it certainly was something that you look back and go, wow, this is really cool. They've set it up extremely well.
And our last question before we let you get out of here, Craig, you're going to have to bear with me. It's a bit of a lengthy one from Wayne McCarthy. It seems that the Eagles are keen to let Oscar Allen walk. I do get it in isolation. The club has had recent challenges with long-term contracts to players 26 and older. He has had injury challenges, and the band one compensation pick they would get for him would be a pick in the top 3. But it does make me wonder if the Eagles can remember that they actually had a pick in the top 3 last year, but they traded it away for a handful of magic beans. At the time, the club seemed to play down the fan dissent, and the attitude of the recruitment team seemed to be, we don't listen to the outside news, we're comfortable with our decisions. It was said that they were trying to be nice and trying to be shown to be easy to deal with. That way, Sydney would make it easy for them to get Chad Warner at the end of the season without having to pay too much. With the noise of Warner staying in Sydney, have the Eagles just got this wrong? They are clearly a long way off being competitive, and with the new Tassie team looming, Richmond went hard at the draft to build their team. Do the Eagles have no desperate choice but to do the same thing now, along with the appropriate messaging to the fan base about what their plan is? God, what would you say to that?
Yeah, I think right now Australian is more valuable to West Coast as a draft pick than he is as a player in their quest to be genuinely successful in a top 4 team again. Because by the time that happens, he's going to be long gone. Like this is, they look 3 to 4 years away from being able to challenge for the finals again. So you need to build as many players up as possible. And he's one of those guys who they could do that with. They didn't want to move out of Elliot Yeo 4 years ago, or Andrew Gaff, or Jack Darling, or Tom Barras, or Jeremy McGovern, or any of these sorts of guys. They wanted to keep all of them together. So that was their chance then to maybe get some extra picks in. They didn't. So now if you look at the list, it's Harley Reid and it's Oscar Allen. Who else are they going to be able to trade or lose who another club would want? You don't want to lose Harley, so you're going to have to lose Oscar is the way I look at it. And when you look back at also, they split a pick previously as well to get Ruben Jinby and Elijah Hewitt when it could have been Harry Sheasel. So they do, if they can get picks 1 and 2 or 2 and 3 or 3 and 4, whatever it would end up being where they finish this year, that's going to give them the chance to get the number of good players in, and then turn to Harley and say, look, we're building players around you now. So trust us to bring these guys in, and they'll be good players with you. Please stay. As opposed to, or if he leaves and they get 3 first-round picks on top of what they got for Oscar Allen as well, then suddenly you've got the Richmond scenario. So I think Oscar will be the player who they'll say, you are too valuable for us as a non-player than you are as a player.
Well, Craig, we'll let you go there, mate, because we can see you've literally got a flight to catch. You've got to check your baggage and you've got to follow the Dockers all the way over to Melbourne. Thanks so much for jumping on with us today, and all the best following Freo around this week.
Thanks. Have a good day, everyone. Don't
forget, we are brought to you by TabTouch. Got the touch? Download the TabTouch app today. You win some, you lose some more. For free and confidential support, visit gamblinghelponline.org.au. And also remember, you can watch or listen to this podcast on YouTube Music. Leave us a rating and a review. And don't forget to follow this podcast so you don't miss an episode. Thanks so much for watching and listening. And stay tuned to thewest.com.au for all the latest in sport news. We'll chat to you later in the week.